Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Lauren Izo. And coming up in this edition, the IDF hits Hamas targets in the Gaza Strip after overnight rockets land in Israel. How is crime changing amid the pandemic? We'll explore if staying home is stopping Israelis from breaking the law. And happy birthday, Joseph. A Holocaust hero gets birthday messages from around the world for his 101st birthday. Let's begin with an unexpected overnight escalation in the Gaza Strip. Early this morning, 2 rockets were fired towards southern and central Israel, both landing in open areas. One near Ashdod and the other on Palmachim Beach just south of Tel Aviv. Security forces tried to shoot down the projectile headed toward the central region with the Iron Dome anti-missile defense system, but unsuccessfully. Weapon fragments landing just south of Tel Aviv in Bat Yam, only causing minor damage, and no injuries were reported. The red alert system was triggered in Ashdod, according to the IDF, but not Palmachim or Bat Yam, because the rocket was headed toward unpopulated areas. Following the launch, the Israel Air Force struck targets in the Strip, targeting underground infrastructure and military posts belonging to Hamas. Let's hear more about it from Daniel Pomerantz, the CEO of Honest Reporting. He's with me in studio. Hi, Daniel.
Hi,
Thank you
Lauren.
so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so we heard a report just a few hours ago that Hamas is blaming these rockets on the thunderstorm. What exactly happened?
Well, not Hamas. It's actually the IDF that's saying that a bolt of lightning struck the rocket launcher and caused it to accidentally launch. I actually spoke to one of the IDF spokespeople this morning, and he explained to me that that actually happened a year ago and that stranger things have happened. The thing is, though, the rocket launcher was loaded and aimed at Israel intentionally, and that's why the IDF did respond to the launch, because Hamas ultimately has responsibility for keeping its rockets under control.
Well, how likely is it that it was actually a mistake and they didn't intentionally fire the rockets? Are we believing those reports?
Well, stranger things have happened, and it is the official position of the IDF at this point.
Understood. We haven't had a large escalation with Gaza for a long time. We have sporadic rocket fire every now and then, but, could we be edging closer anytime soon to some sort of escalation with Gaza, or does it look like things are pretty calm on that front for now?
We don't seem to see the classic indications of that kind of escalation. Usually you see either an increased amount of rockets heading towards southern Israel or any amount of rockets heading up towards central Israel. Now, this latest rocket did land near Bat Yam, which is getting close to Tel Aviv, but it does appear that it wasn't intentional, and it does appear that it's not continuing.
All right. We also know that Mike Pompeo, the U.S. Secretary of State, is on his way to Israel for, one last trip before the president-elect Joe Biden takes over. Who knows if he's going to try to implement some last-minute policies, maybe against the Palestinians, maybe regarding Iran. We obviously don't know what's about to happen. But are we going to see some sort of backlash from the Palestinians, on the heels of those meetings in Israel?
Well, we'll almost certainly see rhetoric. But ultimately, over the years, what we've found is that the Palestinians have not been coming to the table to negotiate under the Trump administration, and also didn't under the prior Obama administration. And so in that sense, neither Obama's policies nor Trump's policies have actually changed what Palestinians' actions are. And we have to judge a government by its actions, not just by its words.
Absolutely. Speaking of the Trump administration, we know that this Trump administration largely alienated the Palestinians and vice versa. The Palestinians also alienated the Trump administration. When we do see Biden entering the White House, are we going to see, that relationship between the Palestinians and the U.S. intensify or calm down?
Well, alienation is a funny word, because while the Trump administration certainly reduced foreign aid and applied greater pressure on the Palestinians, they actively encouraged them to come to the negotiating table and put together a significant plan to make them a part of the regional peace process. I think under a Biden administration, we'll see increased pressure on Israel over settlements or annexation, that sort of thing. We'll see decreased pressure on Palestinians over terrorism and increased foreign aid for Palestinians. But ultimately, in the sense that both parties have always, both Democrats and Republicans, have always invited Palestinians to negotiate peace, and Palestinians have always consistently refused. That's been a pattern throughout the last 2 administrations.
Like I said previously, it's been quite a long time since the last large military conflict with Gaza, since 2014, Operation Protective Edge. I'm wondering, what do you think could be the tipping point before there is another large escalation?
Well, a major change that's happened since the last operation is that not only do we have Iron Dome, which shoots down rockets and missiles, now we have the underground system that detects tunnels, and now even a laser system that can shoot down the kites and balloons.
Some high-tech stuff.
Exactly, but ultimately it makes terrorism relatively impotent. The tipping point would have to be a barrage of attacks that actually can overwhelm Israel's defense systems to the point that the only way to stop it would actually be military action. Otherwise, Israel's in the enviable position of making terrorists look pretty ineffective.
All right, we'll have to wait and see how this escalates. Thank you so much, Daniel Pomerantz.
Thanks, Lauren.
It looks like Israel will be getting its hands on the Pfizer COVID vaccine as early as this January. The Prime Minister announcing on Friday that a deal has been signed with the company for enough doses to vaccinate around half of the population. According to Pfizer executives, the vaccine has been proven 90% effective against the virus.
זהו יום גדול למדינת ישראל, ויום גדול בדרך לניצחון שלנו על הקורונה. ברגעים אלו אנחנו חותמים על ההסכם עם חברת פייזר לקבלת 8 מיליון חיסונים עבור 4 מיליון אזרחי ישראל. החיסון של פייזר דורש 2 מנות חיסון לאדם. השאיפה היא שהספקת החיסונים של פייזר תתחיל בחודש ינואר, ושהיא תלך ותגבר בחודשים לאחר מכן. כל זה תלוי כמובן באישורם של רשויות הבריאות, הן בארצות הברית והן בישראל. יש לנו עוד הסכמים עם עוד חברות מבטיחות, בדרך לקבלת עוד מיליוני חיסונים לאזרחי ישראל. המשימה הלאומית שלנו היא לאפשר חיסון לכל אדם בישראל, כל מי שירצה זאת, בלי יוצא מן הכלל.
Meanwhile, authorities are again saying infection rates may be increasing. Israel's coronavirus task force meeting today to discuss a possible rollback on easing lockdown restrictions. They had previously discussed opening some additional stores amid a new night curfew. That could be on hold for now. Here are the latest figures. On Saturday, the health ministry reported 286 new COVID-19 cases. There are 144 people currently in critical condition, and 2,732 Israelis have died from the virus. Let's go live to Dr. Manfred Green, director of the University of Haifa's International Masters of Public Health program. Thank you, Professor, for joining me.
Thank you.
First of all, I want to talk about Pfizer, of course. What do you predict will be the timeline for the vaccine? Who will get it first, and how long do you think it will take for the whole general population to be able to get vaccinated?
Okay, thanks very much. I wanted to start off by saying that we're very happy, and obviously there's congratulations to Pfizer for their vaccine, which seems to be effective, and that's a very good sign. But I wanted to point out now, right at the beginning of this discussion, that I'm a super cautious person. I've worked with vaccines for many years. And I must be honest that I was a little disappointed in the way that Pfizer presented their findings. I think that even though there's an emergency situation, we need to go through a process which is a normal process, which means it should have been published in a reputable journal, giving the details of the study and the details of the finding, something now that can be done in days and published online. At the moment, we have very little information on the vaccine, and I understand that it's being sold and purchased. It seems to me that that's not a very good process, and I would say for other companies, they shouldn't follow that example.
So are you saying that you think it's possible that the vaccine could be less effective than 90%?
The only information that I really know, and I got that off the internet and not from the announcements, was this 90% number. And then when I scrounged around, I managed to find out that these were preliminary results, and that we know how many people got sick, but we don't know how many got sick in each group. So we had to work that out for ourselves. We don't know the confidence interval, in other words, how certain we are about it. So these are simple, and we don't know anything about the age structure, how it function in different age groups. It is possible that it's less effective in older people. So these are very simple pieces of data which can be published at the time of the announcement. And so what I'm saying is that I think that we should be very careful not to get into this emergency situation and say we can skip these very important steps. There are ways of doing it in the right way without wasting time.
But with that said, once the vaccine does arrive in Israel in January, as we expect, it will, the Israel Health Ministry will do its own tests on it, correct?
Well, it's not really, usually a vaccine is not tested again in the sense that it's usually approved by a testing body, usually whether it be the FDA, and Israel has its own committees that actually approve the vaccine. So having given, and we assume then that the company provides all the necessary data to get the approval, and that I'm sure will be done. But I would suggest, and this again, remember that I said that I'm very cautious. I wouldn't hasten with the giving of the vaccine. I think that the vaccine should be given gradually. I don't think it should be given into large numbers of people at once. I think we should do it gradually. We should learn about the vaccine. And we have to remember as well that other vaccines are going to come onto the market. So it may be possible that at some stage we'll say, no, there's a better vaccine. So these are issues that have to be dealt with right now.
I did want to ask you about those other vaccines. There's a Russian one that we've heard about. Some Israeli vaccines are in the works. Are all of them, as good as the Pfizer vaccine is supposed to be, 90% effective? What is the comparison between all these vaccines?
Well, let me make life a little bit more complicated. The 90% number is a very simple number. And again, it's a very non-professional number, as I've said. So we can't really read too much into that. For example, how long is this vaccine effective for? Was that after 1 dose or 2 doses? And also in the different age groups and so on. So we really have very little information on that. So that's something that we're going to learn. I know, again, that people are going to stress that we don't have time to waste. But we do have time to do things correctly. And the time that we can do these things quickly. So I think that, again, we will do this in Israel. I would hope that in Israel, this would be a gradual process. It will not be a very rapid process. And people will understand that when we're dealing with giving a vaccine, particularly to a large part of the population, we need to do that responsibly. And as I said, in a gradual process.
All right, Dr. Manfred Green, thank you so much for your insights on this vaccine.
Thank you very much.
All the best.
All the best.
Hundreds of Israelis protested against the Prime Minister in Jerusalem on Saturday over his alleged corruption and the government's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Protesting against the Prime Minister, who's involved in 3 accusations. He should resign immediately, in my opinion, because the way the country goes, it's the wrong direction.
Meanwhile, today, the Jerusalem District Court is convening for the 3rd hearing in Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's trial on corruption charges. There are a number of major issues relating to the case's critical state's witnesses, some of which the sides have been battling over since May and could shape the course of the trial. Witnesses are due to be called this coming January. Over the last 8 months or so, the world has transformed before our eyes. And so has the way we interact with it. And that's true for everyone, including criminals. According to Israel police, while crime has not increased, types of crimes are changing. And so are the ways police are fighting them. Let's say hello to Mickey Rosenfeld, the Israel police spokesman. Thank you, Mickey, for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
First of all, tell me about these statistics. How is crime evolving during the pandemic?
Well, what we've seen over the first and as well as the second wave of the period that we've been dealing with COVID-19, we've seen a decrease in the number of incidents of crime, and that's basically due to the fact that the population has been at home far more than on regular basis, and that means less thefts, less break-in of vehicles, and in general the public have been at home, which in terms of the Israeli National Police, we've been implementing the different steps and stages of COVID-19 to prevent people from not keeping social distancing, and as well as, of course, wearing masks, which is absolutely critical to their general health and safety.
Now let's talk about the police for a second. How has, fighting the crime changed? And are police feeling safe while they're patrolling the streets during a global pandemic?
Well, we've had over 300 police officers that have been confirmed with COVID-19. So, of course, as a national police force with 29,000 police officers, we have to make sure that our officers are safe in order that we can serve the population and the country. In connection to the regular police operations that have taken place, there's been a shift in terms of strategy and in terms of units. For example, over 1,000 police officers from one of our national units are now completely involved with dealing, as they have been over the last few months, dealing with COVID-19. So instead of dealing with the streets and what is going on in terms of organized crimes, we've had other units such as counter-terrorist units and top counter-terrorist units that work in the field as well, that have been dealing with criminal investigations and criminal-related issues. So there's been a shift, which has been a positive shift, in order to give full force and, of course, increase the amount of police operations that are taking place across the country.
So obviously everybody is now wearing masks in public. I'm curious, when police are searching for a suspect, I can imagine that masks make identifying criminals a lot more complicated. Has that complicated things for you?
Well, that's been one of the difficulties. For example, if somebody goes into a post office and robs the post office and he's wearing a hat and a mask on his face, as he's meant to do according to the rules and regulations. So we have to use far more technology in order to try and find that individual, because we're not using face recognition. But on the other hand, we're trying to look for suspects who are involved in crimes and criminals. So what we do is we make sure that there are more units on the ground. We're making sure that we're using more technology, more CCTV cameras around the different areas, for example, both in terms of regular crimes as well as in terms of manpower and police units on the ground.
So obviously, you know, large gatherings like protests, but not only, have come front and center for the police, at least in terms of what the media covers. What would you say is more challenging, especially amid COVID? Breaking up a political protest or a wedding? Is there a difference in how you would approach these two very different situations?
Well, that's an excellent question, and I have to, of course, confirm that the Israeli National Police are there in order to make sure that we support the public and prevent people from getting COVID-19. One of the more complicated situations, of course, dealing with a wedding. When you come to a wedding and there's 100 or 200 people that have gathered against the rules and regulations of the Ministry of Health and Police, our units turn up there relatively on a small scale and size, and we try to disperse and make sure that people are going home and understanding the situations. But many times we've been approached, our units, sometimes female officers on the ground and male officers, have been attacked by people who are involved in the celebrations when the tensions are high. But we try and message to the public and to the leaders of the different communities, number one, not to hold weddings, and number two, to keep the exact numbers, which is under 20 in terms of a wedding. I can also confirm in terms of the protests, it's rough and tough for our units on the ground. We've had also officers that have been affected by COVID-19 during the protests. We try and make sure that people who have the right to protest in a normal manner, in a correct manner, and of course in a safety manner, by wearing those masks, as well as our officers do as well.
All right, Mickey Rosenfeld joining us from a very rainy day. Thank you so much, and stay dry.
Thank you very much.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will soon be on his way to Israel for one last official visit, just before the Democratic president-elect takes charge in January. During his trip, he'll visit a winery and a West Bank settlement, a first for an acting U.S. Secretary of State. Nittany Manson reports.
With just a little over 2 months left until President-elect Joe Biden is set to take the White House, President Trump's Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is taking one last tour of the Middle East. Mike Pompeo boarded a plane on Friday. His first stop is France. From there, he's expected to travel to Turkey, Georgia, Israel, Qatar, and then Saudi Arabia. Although Biden has been announced the official winner of the U.S. election, Trump is still refusing to concede defeat, and Pompeo doing the same at a recent press conference.
There will be a smooth transition to a second Trump administration.
There is a lot of speculation over what he and the Prime Minister will discuss during the trip, but Iran is certainly on the agenda. Also, Pompeo will be the first acting U.S. Secretary of State to visit a West Bank settlement, planning to take a tour of a winery, which already manufactures a special edition Pompeo wine.
According to a report by the New York Times, citing intelligence officials, Israeli operatives were responsible for the killing of a top al-Qaeda official in Tehran in August. Said to be the group's second in command, he was accused of helping mastermind the 1998 bombings of 2 U.S. embassies in Africa. More in the next report.
Al-Qaeda's second in command, is said to have been killed in Iran back in August by Israeli operatives at the behest of the United States, according to a report by the New York Times. Abdullah Ahmed Abdullah, also known as Abu Mahmoud al-Masri, was seen as a likely successor to Al-Qaeda's current leader, Ayman al-Zawahiri. He was also accused of helping to mastermind the 1998 bombings of 2 U.S. embassies in Africa. The Times reported that he was gunned down by 2 men on a motorcycle in the streets of Tehran on August 7th, and that the killing was kept secret until now. A senior Afghan security source told Reuters in October that Masri, who has long been on the US FBI's most wanted terrorist list, had been killed in Tehran. But Reuters could not corroborate that information. It is unclear what, if any, role the United States had in the killing. On Saturday, Iran denied the report, saying there were no, quote, Al-Qaeda terrorists on its soil. The White House National Security Council did not immediately respond to a request for comment, and the Israeli Prime Minister's office said it was not commenting.
Joseph is one of the oldest righteous among the nations, having saved over 50 Jews during the Holocaust. Last week, as part of celebrating his 101st birthday, he's seen watching a special greeting video of thanks and warm wishes from Holocaust survivors, children and grandchildren of survivors, among others. He even got some messages from Africa and China, 49 countries in total. Take a look.
I was in Auschwitz. I'm 100 years old. I wish you for your 101st birthday, good health, enjoy the rest of your life the best you can.
And it's because of righteous like you that I'm alive. The Jewish Talmud says that if you save one life, you save an entire world. So you literally have over 50 worlds that you've saved that are entire worlds of children and grandchildren. So I wish you many more years of happiness, health, and enjoying the fruits of your actions.
We want to celebrate your life together with everybody that is celebrating with you. Here in Africa, I want to say we're very grateful because you've set a trend of love. It is a trend that has proved that indeed you are a man of love. You had to fight for 54 Jews out of love. There's no greater love such as that one of laying your life for others. We're grateful and we're saying may God continue to bless you. May you continue to flourish. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you.
That was very beautiful. Okay, Israel's wet season has arrived and all the heavy rainfall that comes with it. Thunderstorms raging in Israel's south over the weekend, with emergency services saying they rescued people from their cars in Ashdod, Ashkelon, and Kiryat Malachi. In northern Israel, a bit less rain, but it's expected to continue throughout the country today. There's also heavy flooding near bodies of water, so please be careful. All right, let's take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight calls for some cool and partly cloudy skies with lows at an average of 56 degrees Fahrenheit or about 13 degrees Celsius. Then tomorrow you can expect highs of 70 degrees Fahrenheit or 18 degrees Celsius with mostly partly cloudy skies. And now, just before we say goodbye, let's take a look at what's going viral in Israel. That is Santa Claus at the Dead Sea in Israel. He might be a little bit early for Christmas, but he went to go spread the holiday cheer with his Christmas tree in a very, very hot place. I think he might be a little overheated in that suit. But he's definitely social distancing from all the people at the Dead Sea Resort, so that is a plus. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.37 shekels to the American dollar and 2.57 shekels to the Canadian dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube and Roku TV pages. I'm Lauren Izzo. Thanks for watching.